Once was pro strongman Bobby Thompson, and it's good to be back. Welcome to Off the Bar. Before we get started, I wanted to shoot a harmless plug out there for one of my favorite training methods, as well as one of my favorite partnered companies I've ever worked with, and that's Serious Steel Fitness. And what they specialize in, well, they're going to tell you they only specialize in bands. They make a lot of really cool stuff. That being said, with their bands, what makes them special? One, they are 99.9% latex allergen free. It's a big bonus for those of you out there that do have a latex allergy. I know it's kind of a pain in the ass to work around when you're trying to utilize bands in training for accommodating resistance, or for the fact that they're just lightweight and versatile and just as effective on the run a lot of times as a above average hotel gym if you know what you're doing. So real quick, light, easy, toss them in the bag. They don't take up any space in the gym bag. You find the right size based on your height, as well as what you're looking to get out of the band. For instance, they have a whole graph and section of their website that's designated to explaining to you with this band, if it starts at this height and expands this many inches, you're getting this many pounds per inch of expansion through the range of motion. Except for the thing about Serious Still Fitness, their bands are their bands, their studies are their studies for their bands. What is up, guys? Back for episode 3. Got a couple fun things to talk about. One, let's talk about North America's Strongest Man. I know I am done in the background and in the late on this, but I have some things that are worth saying. One, I've done that contest. I did it back when it was the last opportunity to do the Arnold Canada, and I will tell you that that is, till this day, one of the toughest shows I've ever done. I didn't do great at it. It was my first, it was my second international show. So that being said, I've been there, I've done it. It's a very hard contest. It's a really cool place, and it's a really cool crew. JF does really good things. He was still helping run the show when he was doing that show with me, or when I was doing it with him, I should say. That being said, some standout performances. Obviously, Bryce Johnson taking his second first place finish 2 years in a row at that show. He was one of those guys when he first got on the scene. I didn't like everybody calling him the second coming of Brian Shaw because I thought it cut his legs out from under him a little bit. I'm like, which if you cut his legs out from under him, he's still 6'5", so it really doesn't matter. But it's one of those things where it's no, let this guy kind of grow into who he's going to be. Now, my initial concerns with Bryce were that he was almost like Bambi-like, where he was just so big, but he had all this joint shake. And I always thought that was from a lack of size development, maybe, which is a weird thing to say with a guy that's that big, but with the way he moves, it seems like it hasn't been an issue, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut and say that guy's probably going to be arguing with Trey Mitchell as the next big thing in American Strongman right now. And I say that only because Evan's he's not out. Clearly, he's got some stuff he's working on, been there, done that, wish him speedy recovery. He's also had quite a few injuries over the years, guys. Evan doesn't kind of bitch and moan about him too much, but he's got quite a few, and I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just saying that what's happening to him, kind of par for the course, I think. I think he's got to take some time. I think he still can come back and be T-Rex, but I think right now he's just Evan. And I think T-Rex needs a bit of a break and needs some rebuild stuff, but I'm keeping my nose out of that one. I know Evan can come back if Evan makes the necessary changes. What those necessary changes are, only he's going to know. I think he's earned the double look of, he's having a rough one. Come on, bring him in. I think he's earned the double look, and that's a respect thing that kind of was present when I was coming up, and it was something the guys would talk about, hey, they look back a little bit. It's not always your last contest, and now you can definitely see where we have more people wanting to be involved, and it's hard to get involved because it's not just showing up to a few contests, it's being able to constantly show up at contests, and that's the trait that's hard to replicate season in and season out now. It's the guys who can consistently say, yes, I'll be at that show and I should be in good condition, and then come and do the business part of it to the best of their ability, even if they have a poor show or a couple poor shows in a row. There's a bunch that goes into selecting those guys, and it's not just your last contest. I think in a perfect world, it would be, hey, let's just look at your last contest. But that's my long spiel about Strongman. Anyways, point being, I'm out of it. I'm just some old strong guy. Not old, I feel old, I look old. But yeah, no, not quite old, but just some average strong guy at this point. Now, let's talk about another topic. The biggest fad flip in all of deadlifting recently. This was a cool one. So I remember years and years ago, I actually got shit from numerous medical professionals on my social media via comments and DMs about saying that I needed to enforce the instep portion of my deadlift. And what I mean by that is drive down through the inside of my foot and with my big toe. And what that was doing is, at the time, everybody was into that whole Dan Bell style of deadlifting where he's pushed on the outside of his feet and his big toes are pointed straight up at the ceiling almost. It's a super kind of pronated push. That being said, it worked very well for him. I'm not criticizing anything Dan Bell did. Met him a couple times. Really nice guy. I'm not a huge people person. He was one of the few guys I always look forward to seeing at like random expos and places where it's just a quick wave or a chit chat. But anyways, metaphorical hand job over. For a long time, you saw more and more people doing that. And then I publicly put out a video, not saying I was the first one to do it. I just remember getting shit on for it, saying like, no, actually, I think we need to be driving the inside of the foot into the ground and leveling out that field and not overcompensating with that kind of rotation at the knee and driving out on the feet out of sake of getting hamstring tightness, which is what most people would argue it did for you, which it did in fact do that. I just think it was too much of an argument. And nowadays, I started putting content out talking about driving the inside of my foot down. And after that, I'm not saying I was the first, maybe it just kind of rewrote my algorithm. I started seeing a lot of people talking about that, a lot of smarter people than myself talking about it. And I'm not saying I led the chain, but that's just a massive fad flip that's happened over the last like 5 or 6 years where we're getting, utterly shit on for saying, hey, maybe the inside of our feet shouldn't be off the ground. And maybe like we don't sacrifice that outside push to that push to the outside of the foot, but maybe we replant it to the inside. And now it's everybody's teaching, right? Is drive the instep down or drive the big toe down. So I think it's cool. It's always fun to see fads coming back and forth. But the long or the short is of this, if you're an upcoming strength athlete or coach, and I'm not saying go tell somebody smarter than you that they're wrong, but if you've got something in your gut, like that is right, or if you've seen it, like you can't explain the science, but you've done it, you've seen it, you've witnessed it. Don't quit on it just because somebody who is smarter than you says you're wrong. Hold on tight to that, because that whole big toe thing opened up so many business doors for me when I went public with that. It blasted my Instagram. I was getting deadlift consults left and right. I still am getting them pretty frequently. I had deadlift consults turn into long-term clients, which was one of the coolest things in the world, because I've got some of my favorites. That's what it turned into. It put me in contact with individuals in different countries. I still have a few medical professionals I get to chat with on Instagram in different countries, to include Indochina. So long spiel short, if you're a coach or an upcoming strength athlete and you've got something and you just know, not because you want it to work or because you want something special, but you've done it, surprised yourself, and you just know, hold on to the something. Hold on to it until you're smart enough to explain why you think this works, even when everybody kicks you in the face about it. At worst, you've got an Instagram reel where you get to come on and say, so I was wrong. And people love it when you embarrass yourself. So those reels are going to take off anyways. So there really is not a lose-lose. So as you educate yourself, don't try and get away from the things that you may have considered to be less than intelligent because you were younger or younger minded when you had them. I don't believe I ever thought that. No, dig into that a little bit, because you experienced something anecdotal and in the field that went, this is a thing. So, okay, spiel over. Now the next one, is AI taking over coaching? No. I don't think so. Will it eventually be able to? Yes, because the big argument that I see with AI is that if you say, hey, AI, is this a good deadlift? And you put it into Chat GPT, AI is going to ram itself out there to every data whore that it can find, and it's going to pull that intel in, which is going to bring in a series of, one, most people can't deadlift. Most of the videos on the internet of deadlifting are wrong, and there are comments in the bottom of them saying they are right and wrong. There's always some new Instagram influencer who has no idea what they're doing, nor are they very strong, or worse, they're super strong and they deadlift in a way that only they can really do because of specified genetic outliers that don't occur very often. Well, it's going to pull from all of this, and it's going to give you an answer, and it's probably not going to give you the right answer, okay? So as far as AI goes, it's one of those things where I think it will be super effective when we learn to control the data pools and the individuals it pulls from. But also at the same time, that's when we're going to see AI become its most limited, because one of the cool things about it is that it can reach out to everything. However, I do think that's going to be its downfall. So is AI taking over coaching right this second? I don't think so. Sorry if I just touched my mic and blasted you guys with white noise, my bad. Is it taking over coaching? I don't think so. Is it offering a level of competition I don't think most coaches are prepared for? Yes, because now you're going to start seeing that like mid-level market of pricing, and what people get for that pricing is going to be amazing. It's going to be quick. It's going to be fast. And most coaches are like, well, I can do the in the moment. Okay, yeah, we know. The robot can be programmed to do that. You have character, you have thought, you have laughter, you have jokes. You can also see the human side that AI can't. Those are the only things you really present as valuable. Now, certain people aren't going to need that, and they're going to be able to pay a third to half your rate and get everything they need, and they're going to be just fine. But again, what that does is it means that everybody that's above that price point has got to have something special about them. And it doesn't have to be a sparkling personality. Mine's not always sparkling. Sometimes it just kind of like glints a little bit. Not really. That's usually my head after I shave it. But that being said, is AI coming for my job? No, I'm not remotely worried about it because I'm one of those coaches who is attempting to use AI to not tell me what answers are, but store the data that I already possess and make the math problems easier. So instead of being scared of AI, I think all coaches need to be moving over and going, okay, how am I going to utilize this to be better? And being better doesn't mean not knowing. I am in full support. If you have all the data in your brain, and the difference is that you have to write it down and work through it and take the measurements, versus if you can pop it in a calculator that only contains the data that you know to be right. And you can use that as a tool to spread information or maybe make your job more efficient as a coach by removing some human error from your math. You'd be an idiot not to do that. Now, where a lot of coaches fall short is they don't know how to make the tool. Or, well, I didn't. And then I started using some of the tools at hand, and then I became a little bit better coach who did math a little bit faster. Okay, and that's a big deal. So that's how I think AI is not really necessarily going to take over coaching, but if you don't learn how to use it, you're a thing of the past. Now, this one. PEDs and curing obesity. And by PEDs, I mean steroids. Okay, so I am somebody who, by standard of men my size and most walk-around standards, I'm lean-ish. Not stage lean, not Jay Cutler lean for all you dumbasses out there that think that is lean. But I am not fat. Now, elevated body fat percentage, you could very simply argue that if you look at just some general standards of living concepts we have out there in America now. However, none of those concepts talk about men being over 300 pounds with abs. They don't talk about it. So I'm not so concerned with that level of obesity. I'm talking about the guys that are, 25, 30% body fat, highly elevated levels of body fat. And of course, body fat is estrogenic. And if you have body fat that is that high for prolonged periods of time, it's more than acceptable to think or to assume your TRT is probably necessary. The problem is when people start taking TRT and abusing anabolics, and initially they take the TRT when they are significantly overweight, have a bunch of that body fat hanging off them, and they're not seeing the results. And then they get online and they see this guy who is jacked and shredded on 250 milligrams of test a week. Now, some of those guys are just lying. However, I can personally attest to that the lower your body fat is, the better TRT-related drugs work at lower dosages compared to when you were of higher body fat. There's certain genetic value there. That's because body fat does contain androgen receptors, and they're not the receptors we want getting. We want getting the goods we're putting into our bodies if you are doing that. So when we're walking around the gym and we see these guys where, I'm on TRT, and they've got body fat just hanging off them, probably not going to be the best thing. You're wasting your money. I don't say you're wasting your money, but your money is significantly less effective than if you just went on to some very basic caloric deficiency-based diet, worked on 10,000 steps a day, and avoided processed foods to the best of your ability. It's really hard for most people to do that, but you can still lose weight and manage that. So getting those life markers in check, it's not only going to help you live longer, because putting anabolics into your body, it's going to have negative effects. It's just going to. For every positive, there is a negative. But the better condition that you're in when you start that, the longer your body's going to be able to handle those negatives before they become life-altering. So do PEDs cure obesity? No, I don't believe they do. I actually think taking PEDs while you are really, really obese, which is where we see a lot of men nowadays shifting towards, is actually going to be long-term potentially less helpful than you might believe, because it's going to drain your wallet faster, and it's also going to give you a bad taste in your mouth about how fast it's not working. But anyways, guys, thanks back. Thank you for coming back. Thanks back. Jesus. Thanks for coming back to Off the Bar. See you for episode 4.